Hello and welcome to the Next 100 Days podcast. My name is Graham Arrowsmith.
And my name's Kevin Appleby. So, Graham, today we're going to talk about apps. And we're going to put a spin on this because we've got our ongoing series about doing business with the affluent. Now, we're going to talk about how an app would fit into your business and how perhaps if you're doing business with that group of people, apps can make a difference.
Now, we've got one of the best there is when it comes to apps, and he helps other people as well when it comes to developing their apps. It's Patrice Archer. Patrice, welcome to the Next 100 Days podcast.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be here. How are you guys doing?
Now, you're going to have to explain that accent to people who've only just heard you for the first time, because you don't sound like you're from, the north of England.
No, all the south. And actually, most people when they meet me or hear me think, "Oh, you South African?" If they've been to South Africa, are you Scandinavian or Dutch? But actually, I'm French originally, hence the name Patrice. I learned my English in Belfast when I was young, so it's a weird mix.
Well, given that you're French, that's all we've got time for today. So no, promise, we want to welcome you to the podcast. You've got a company called Appy Ventures. Is that the company name, or is it just the brand that you're using?
It's the company name, yes. It's been going for a number of years, and I must say it's one of those. Naming a business is probably like naming a child. You don't want to think about it too much. So Appy Ventures, we do apps, web apps and mobile apps, and we build ventures, with people.
I suppose you could very easily put an H in front of Appy Ventures.
I thought about that afterwards. Yes, no, it's a good point.
I have to say, I'm really surprised that you thought about that afterwards, because it seems so obvious. But apps and so forth. I really like the name. It's quite catchy. Appy Ventures. If you want to find out more about Patrice's website, it's appyventures.com. So tell us a little bit that if I was to build or if I was to plan to build an app, what would be driving me to do that for a start?
It's a good question. And I'll tell you what the ideal reason for wanting to do an app is. You have a deep understanding of something. So maybe your industry, your customer base, and you see a pain point, you see a challenge, you see that's not something that's not being done optimally currently, or there's another app out there that's doing something, but if only it did X, Y, Z as well. That tends to be the best start of conversations I have with people. Something that they know innately, and something they really believe could be done better to serve the target audience.
Do they come to you with that as a business idea without any money? So you're often sort of parallel thinking for them to get them through their, fundraising round.
I love talking to people at every stage, and I love helping. This karma. You help people, and often I've got clients. 3 years ago, you spoke to my friend Bobby, and he said that was great, and now I like it. So I love helping people in the ecosystem. You don't necessarily have to have money for things, and what I like to talk to people about is how you can minimize investment to get to a point where you can really validate your concept. Because I hate seeing people building technology because they think it's a great idea, and then losing their money, failing miserably because they haven't really validated the concept. So, in short answer, if you have money, that's great. But whatever conversation we're going to start by validating with the least amount of effort possible and cost.
Tell me a little bit more about validating the concept. What sorts of things would you do with a client to validate an idea?
It's a good question. And just to preface this, my first career was investment banking and private equity, which I did for 10 years. So I come at things with a real business angle. Because creating technology for the sake of it is pointless. It's got to be to ideally create a return on investment. And to me, there's two ways to validate. One big way, which tries to hit two measures. Ideally, what you do is you understand holistically the pain point, what you're looking to achieve, the users. And to validate that idea, you want to get to a point where you can maybe visualize. I don't know if you heard of wireframes. Do you know what I mean by wireframes? Yeah.
Yep. When you're building a website and so forth. That's
exactly. So it's effectively like a black and white stick figure representation. There'll be an image here, some text here. But the good thing about doing wireframes is you can start visualizing what your idea will look like and how it will work. So you can go and, God forbid, ask people what they think about it. There's a big difference between, I like to do this, and that, and let me show you what I'm thinking about. And you walk them through the user journey. Ideally, you get those wireframes designed up into how it might look as a product. Right. And what we tend to do with clients is get it to a point where it's a prototype. So it's graphic design, made interactive, no coding. Don't start coding, because that's when it gets a bit more expensive.
Yeah.
You can prototype, show people, and you get some real quality feedback, really good quality feedback to validate that idea.
Right. So they will look at this. In print terms, I'd call it a scamp. So basically, it's a mock-up. It's a mock-up of what you're planning to do, but you've not spent much money doing it. But in this particular case, you've got something visual for somebody to have a look at, and so that maybe they're hearing the story as well as seeing it. And at that moment, you're really asking them a number of questions to say, is this?
Yes.
If you have this on your phone, will you use it? And basically, will it get to? What would the end state be for you? I mean, how would you know that you've been successful using it? I mean, presumably these things should be answered by the app design.
It certainly gives. I like the 80-20. It's a Pareto's law, and I think it gives you a really good steer. And there's some studies that, lots of statistics are made up on the spot, and this will be no exception. But if you ask 5 people what they think, without needing questions, just what they think about this and what thoughts they have, you get about the same level of feedback as you would do so you get 80% of feedback you would have done from going to 1,000 people. So personally, I really believe, go and ask 5 people, quality questions, put yourself out there. It might be uncomfortable as it's your baby. You go and ask those questions, get the feedback, iterate, go and ask 5 more people. You've got a real sort of solid understanding of what they think the app will do. And on the side of that, the other thing I'd recommend, again, maybe with business hat on, is to do something called a lean canvas. Do you guys know lean canvas?
A lean canvas? No. It might mean something once you explain it.
I've heard the question before, but I think you need to clarify what it is, Patrice.
It's effectively, it's a business plan on a page, really. That's it's a one-pager. What's the problem you're trying to solve? What's the solution? What's the market? Who are the users are going to be using this? What are the costs? What are the revenues? What's useful? And what's your channel to market as well, which is a huge question, which I like to focus on. Because between that little prototype, some user research, and forcing yourself to think, is this a business or is this a vanity project? Can we make some revenue from this? How do we acquire those customers? Between these two aspects, I think you're removing the emotion out of it. You're in a place to really understand if this has legs or not. Is
it the case that you have, it must fill you with dread when somebody comes along and says, everybody's my market for this? I mean, unless maybe you're Facebook or something, it's not going to be like that. Presumably with your business hat on, you're going to ask a couple of questions to say, are you sure? You've really got to narrow it down. And in this particular series, we're talking about the affluent, but I wondered whether or not any apps have come across your desk, as it were, and you've been involved in that might be serving the sort of more affluent individual.
Yes, and with care around sort of non-disclosure agreements I have, but we've done some work, for example, with Louis Vuitton in Paris, specifically with their innovation center. So we're working with them to help run the innovation center and create, frankly, experiences is probably the best way to say it, for their high net worth, ultra high net worth individuals. More recently, there's a drinks related business that's come to us that serves uniquely ultra high net worth. That's all they look at. And the premise they have, so without going too much into it for good reasons, but it's trying to say that affluent type of demographic, what they want is a high touch service. They want a high quality experience, which can be very people intensive. So is it possible to supplement it with technology to enhance the experience of that customer journey from never heard of you all the way to being an ambassador for your brand? And currently it's done a lot by people. So what we talked about with them is we can use tech to automate some of the backroom and operation side. That's fine. So that makes it more streamlined, more rapid, better service.
Yeah.
On the front end, so for this specifically, it's giving a tool to their affluent clients to see visually, in that case, the portfolio, to understand fluctuation in the value of their portfolio, to be able to understand more the history and the value of the assets that they've acquired from this company.
Yeah.
And so it's that angle which is enhancing the experience with, it's got to be high quality, Graham. It absolutely has to be.
It has to be. And I that's a great example. It really is a great example. So you've got somebody, very, very wealthy individuals who've invested in some form of drinks opportunity, shall we say, and the app almost it bleeds into that relationship with them that enables them to experience more about the sort of benefits of them investing. Presumably it was an investment situation. So from that point of view, that makes a huge amount of sense. And you know what? So many people, I have to say, from my business come along and they're really, all they're interested in is finding investors. But the beauty of it is it's not just a sort of upfront thing, because then a relationship starts.
Yeah.
And during that investment period, it might be 1 year or 3 years or whatever, or even more, then surely if you had some other form of getting to those people, then that would be money well spent. Kevin?
But Graham, I'm thinking back to one podcast guest we had in particular who was looking for that investment from the affluent. We were looking at investing in fine wines.
Yeah.
Now, a fine wine investment isn't just a case of something fairly generic. There are cases of lots and lots of different things. They'll mature into something worth money over different time spans and so on. And I can see an app in that sort of environment that's, one, it's giving you the stats on what's this case of wine worth at the moment.
Yeah.
Number two, it's giving you the provenance, the background information of what it is you've invested in. I can see a huge opportunity to enhance the experience in that sort of use case.
Yeah, and I think this is exactly what Appy Ventures can do for companies. And would it be a hugely expensive thing, without giving away the details of any particular company? But is it a sort of, it's not £100, it's not maybe £100,000, somewhere in between, presumably.
Yes, I think that's fair to say. And the way we tend to work is we love working with founders. We love working with entrepreneurial people looking to do something. We've worked with big companies, but I'll be honest, when you work with a big company, you're just a service provider. Yeah. And I much prefer being a tech partner where we can have these discussions, which are exactly this. Yeah. What's the problem? What's your opportunity? How can we get creative? What's the other possible? I'll put my tech expert hat on. You put your industry expert hat on, and together we'll come up with something really value added for your audience. And I quite like doing that staged approach. So let's do a prototype, and that's in the low thousands to get to that point. And if at the end of that, the answer is no, it's not going to fly, then it's no problems, best wishes. I'm so glad we did that. Yeah. Then after that, it's the build, or that phase one, as I like to call it. People call it MVP, but I hate the term minimum viable product. Viable sounds rubbish. I mean, that does not sound good. So phase one, or minimum launch product, and that's in the tens of thousands, but it doesn't need to be too high in that level. It depends how much you want to do. And I tend to encourage clients down on that front. Do the initial hook. Do the thing that's going to, your clients are going to go, that's great, that's useful. And then build on top of it once you've seen some success. Right. Ideal world, we work together for 2-3 years and build something really exciting for them and their customer base.
So do you then take them through that? Because presumably as they scale up the volume amongst their, either existing customers or new customers, there's a degree of matching this product to those people. So there's some marketing that needs to go on to introduce the idea, to encourage the idea, all of which you've learned from the initial, I don't want to say MVP because you'll probably bite my head off, but the end of the day of that initial sort of programming. you've kind of got an idea. But is it you doing that marketing, or presumably it's the marketing departments of the various companies that you're dealing with?
It tends to be the marketing departments of these companies. What we can do, though, is share our experience, because what's key for me is Appy Ventures is not a huge business. It's a nice business. It's fun.
Yeah.
And it's all about having experienced people who are entrepreneurs. That's where we all are.
Yeah.
And we can share that knowledge of being practitioners, not theorists.
Yeah.
So it's nice to say, in theory, this could work, but I'd rather point to 5 cases where we try different things, and here's the results we had. So especially from the marketing side, actually, I really like, I call this the highway of client analogy, if I can sort of explain that, which is, I see a lot of people spending time on the product, and they spend so much time on this idea. They spend very little time talking to customers. Yeah. We've already addressed that. That's important. But what they'll tend to do is they'll work on the product, work on the product. Then they go, ta-da, it's ready. We can launch. Nobody cares. And then they'll spend lots of money on things like Facebook, Instagram, AdWords, prices of which have pretty much doubled in the last 12 months. Yeah, it's a mess. I much prefer doing a bit like a B2B2C, or I prefer doing a strategy where you get people who've got an audience already. Let's call them gatekeepers to an audience. You talk to them from prototype stage. You want to de-risk that concept by pre-selling. I love doing that because you're minimizing the risk of things going wrong. And when you're ready to launch, you're launching to their audience. And maybe you pay them some money, maybe you do this, maybe you do that, but you've de-risked your launch. So
yeah, I do like that. It wasn't too long ago, Kevin, that we had one of the best influencer businesses, and it seems to me that what Patrice is really saying is that, you know, that the idea of going to people who have an audience, who would be respected in that audience, seems to be a very, very smart marketing strategy.
Yeah. And also asking the question that says, if we were to produce this app, would that be something that you would be prepared to buy? And you can supplement that with the questions, and what particular things would you be wanting it to do?
Yeah. I would imagine that the influencers are probably just saying, I'm using this app. I mean, tomorrow I've got a young a lady coming around who works for our charity, and she's joined us to boost our local sort of presence. And she's one of these people who makes, you know, got the sort of white light in front of her and makes up her face. And, you know, I met her for interview when she looked completely plain, and you know, with due respect, lovely girl, but you wouldn't notice her. Puts the makeup on, and it's like a model. You know, it's amazing. She has about 134,000 followers on Instagram. Now that's a pretty. So she says, I think this particular makeup is worth thinking about. I think there's probably the better part of a few thousand who are going to say, I agree, I'm going to get that
straight away. And I think what's interesting with that's the route to market. And if you've done the work right in terms of the quality of the product, and if I can call that viral loops or referral network effects, you can transform the initial few thousand people who say, yep, I'll buy it, into a business. We're actually working currently with an entrepreneur whose main asset was an Instagram account with, I think, 180,000 followers, really good engagement. And we're building a business off the back of that. So it's leveraging an audience to backfill through technology with a product that the audience wants. And it becomes a real business, not just I'll put a little advert for something, which is nice. That's fine. Yeah. But a lot more can be built on top of it.
So are you really a tech guy at heart then, Patrice? Is that? I mean, your degree and all that kind of, assuming that you did do a good degree, were you brought up that way?
Not at all. No, my first career.
You mentioned banking, but
I fell into banking after university. No particular reason. Once I realized being a banker equaled being an evil person and despicable.
You knew enough about that anyway. You're from France.
Yeah.
But, I'm sorry. Don't abuse the guests.
Aaron Smith will have no guests left if you.
No. He knows I'm only joking.
It's I'm very used to it. The British sense of humor. For me, I after the financial crisis of 2007 or 2008, finance wasn't particularly that fun place to be. I started experimenting with startups on the side. So everything from a little fashion brand, a peer-to-peer lending platform, e-commerce platform, say an early Shopify, which didn't work, an early Crowdcube, which I didn't quite manage to launch, but learning by doing, learning so much until we had our first child 10 years ago. And I thought, excuse my French, but screw this.
Yeah.
I'd rather do something I'm passionate about, which was not finance, and be able to see my child grow up. So I flipped it around from, in the middle of everything is life, and working businesses around it. That's what I wanted to achieve. Yeah. So I've been remote working for 10 years, building a fully remote team. It's a real enabler to use technology. So to answer your question, so that was long-winded, I'm completely non-technical. I know how to talk to developers and do the user experience, the strategy, the commercialization, the product management. But then I find really good developers who can do that. That's why we tend to work with non-technical founders as well, because I know exactly where they're coming from and what they're worried about and what's going to help them succeed.
Experience says the last thing you want to put in front of a non-technical person, whether that's a founder, a client, whatever, is a techie to talk to them, because you will lose them very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very true. It depends on the techie, but 95% of the ones I've met end up being technical because that's what they know and love. Yeah. And they need that interface. And often I describe that as a product manager, which basically understands the requirements from the client and then translates to the developer and makes sure that you get the right result, right? It's not just about translating, get the right result. That's critical. That's a lot of what we do.
So Appy Ventures then, obviously, I'm assuming is still in its growth phase, because apps have not come to a grisly end. There's more and more of them. I have to say, I find it quite difficult. I mean, I have an iPhone, and you can sort of scroll maybe 4 or 5, maybe 5 or 6 times before I get to the end of the app. So I don't know how many that would be, but 40 or 50 or whatever.
Yeah.
But is there a sort of a stat for the average number of apps per person? I imagine it's probably more than 40 or 50.
It's a good question. I think it varies per demographic, I believe. Yeah. And I think interestingly, the younger ones don't have more than the older ones. I used to look at that data quite a lot. I don't so much anymore.
No.
I would say 80 is probably the average that I've seen on people.
Yeah.
Which is quite a few, but also it's not that many when you think about you need to launch something.
Yeah.
You ideally want to be on the home screen for that user. You've got to be adding a lot of value. There's got to be a really key reason and driver for the people to use it.
And the other thing is, it's all very well having the app on your phone, but the business wants you to use it. There has to be a palpable reason for somebody to go back and revisit the app, because it's going to give them more joy or whatever else they get from it. So presumably ongoing use in some way.
Yes, and a lot of the stuff. So again, people start with, I have this idea, and the conversation I want to move them to is why is it important, etc. But also, how do you keep people engaged? What might be the, for example, push notification strategy that you might have, or email sequencing strategy to support that, because people go to their emails. That's a normal behavior. Mm-hmm. You can remind them who you are, add value to them, and then bring them back at the right time into the app. Just the app is missing a trick. You've got to look. I like to think about this whole journey. Never heard of you, ambassador for your brand, for your app. There's so many little touch points. You got to seek to optimize all of them cleverly to get to the right result.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin, do you have a favorite app up there in Northumberland? I mean, presumably it's how to befriend sheep and things like that, isn't it?
Yeah, well, there's so many sheep, you probably don't want to befriend too many.
Too many friends.
I don't know. I suppose I've got my phone next to me right now, Graham, and I'm going to look at what's on page 1 of my phone.
Oh,
and actually, as I look at this, there's the BBC weather app is at the top.
Right.
There's a camera app. There's the Grow CFO app.
Oh, well, yeah.
Then it's things that I use nearly all the time. It's Notability, which I use as a notebook. There's WhatsApp, which is a key communication tool. It's Slack. It's LinkedIn. And there's something else called Simple Mind on there, which is a mind mapping tool. That's
Mm.
on
That's
screen
good.
one. Screen two, I've got a health
Yeah,
and fitness
you can go on,
home
Kevin, but
assistant, Facebook, Zendesk,
we're only here for an hour.
Kindle.
You've just taken 10 minutes telling us all your apps.
Yeah.
But what is interesting is you had some quite unique apps on your front page, which suggests that you're using them more often.
Yes, I tend to put things I use more often on the first 2 pages. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, Trello app. That's the other big one that's on the first page.
Yeah. Well,
something I use all the time to plan stuff, manage to-do lists. Yeah.
If you had to turn to your smartphone on, Patrice, what would be the kind of phone apps that you would have? And presumably you would have some of your client apps on there.
I would, yes. Funny enough, one of my favorite apps, and I switched across from iOS to Apple to Android for quite a specific app called Off the Grid. So this is going to be the opposite of what we want to hear. But Off the Grid, what it does is actually it blocks your phone from using it. So I think there's such a thing as people using their phones too much. So what it does is it basically says, how long do you want to be off the grid? A couple of hours, fine. And it blocks your phone. You can't use it. And you have to pay a fine if you want to use your phone, which I think is a genius move from the developers who get the money from the fine. But I'm using that sort of tongue in cheek, but I do actually use that app because we got to be cognizant that it's a tool. It shouldn't take over our life. The things I use regularly would be, Google Maps, email, something called ClickUp, which is a bit like Trello, Kevin, but it's got wider amount of use cases, lots of automation in it. And then I quite enjoy things like there's one called Elevate, which is brain training. There's one called Strong Lift, which is weightlifting, which I started doing, and one called Story Shots, which is book summaries, which is lovely. That's the kind of ones I use daily, almost. Yeah, daily.
I've got to be the most boring person amongst us here, but then again, that was a given. But it's things for me. It's photos and WhatsApp and LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. Oh, and my Tesla app, which of course runs the car. So I love that. And
I think that's very, very dangerous when you've got to rely on a working app on your mobile phone to be able to start your car, Graham.
Oh, well, I mean, it's not the only way of doing it. But yeah, I do understand what you're saying, but works every time.
If I can pick up, I mean, I also use WhatsApp extensively, and you've both mentioned it. Talking about affluent individuals, there's something about using the tools that the audience wants to use. So in this case, affluent individuals a lot of them tend to use WhatsApp. And there was a project company we were talking to, and they wanted to do tech. They were like, we should do tech. And the more we talked with them, the more we realized the way their client wants to communicate is send a little WhatsApp message to their account manager and just say, I need a flight from Zurich to London tomorrow, 8:00.
Yeah.
And back and forth. And we did some research and studies, and the answer was, don't do tech, just use WhatsApp. Sometimes that's the best answer. Now, you can integrate WhatsApp, especially the business solutions now, into your tech infrastructure, so it becomes a lot more automated and useful internally. I think what's really key is, especially with time-poor, cash-rich, affluent individuals, they don't want you to change the way they do things. They want to do things the way they want to, and you've got to help all around it, and there's ways to do that. That's
really interesting. And you're not ultimately bothered because you're getting a result for a client.
Exactly. I'm not a salesperson. How do we create the right solution? That's it.
Absolutely. Sorry, Kevin.
We talked about information apps. What about community apps? We've talked WhatsApp there for having conversations. Now, people can be active in LinkedIn groups, in Facebook groups, and so on, but do you think that really if you're trying to build a community of folk, then you should try and build that community in an app?
It's a really timely question, actually. I've had a lot of conversations recently with entrepreneurs who are basically saying, we don't want to use Facebook. We want to move away from Facebook, which is in many ways the ultimate community app, or has been. And it's the description they give, it's Facebook for the construction industry. It's Facebook for the legal industry. And they want to create their own community outside of that with a lot of the similar features. I think that's, when you get too big, like a Facebook, you're victim of your own success. I think there's definitely some merit on that, because as the entrepreneur behind it, you can own the ecosystem. And if you're looking to do it simply as well, there's a lot of tools out there, and almost templates of websites that exist on, say, WordPress or Wix, that enable you to have a starting point, a foundation, quickly and cheaply, that you can then scale over time into your own proprietary technology. But I think with the community app, it's got to have the network effect. So you need to have a sufficient amount of people initially for there to be the conversations, the responses, the interest for people to come back in regularly. I don't know if that answers your question, Kevin.
Isn't that what you're doing with Grow CFO, Kevin?
We don't really have a lot of active conversation in there. We have some, and the main purpose of the Grow CFO app, and that's based on one of the things that Patrice has just described. We use BuddyBoss as the basis of the Grow CFO website, and we've got a very big learning management system in there as well, LearnDash. What the app does, that's built on BuddyBoss app, it allows us to put all of the training courses onto the mobile platform. So you go into our app and you can access all your training courses on the go. Yeah, that's the main purpose.
And I think what's great with that is you're focusing on what the user wants instead of focusing on creating from scratch a bit of technology that enables that. You can really focus on the needs of your individual users and deliver what they need. So yeah, I think that's great.
Sorry, Kevin.
Looking at the community side of it, and another app that I've got there on a very early page on my phone is Roman Modelers Club, which is run by our previous guest, Mr. Justin Noble. It's a very active app. It's got about 6,000-7,000 members, and it was born out of a Facebook group. And one of the complaints about Facebook that a lot of us have is that Facebook decides far too much on what it thinks you want to look at. You're part of a Facebook group, but it doesn't show you all the activity in the group. It's selective. You might have 100 friends in Facebook, but you only ever seem to see what 10 of them are doing in your feed.
I find it fascinating, and there's a lot of there's a nice saying. I think it's if you don't pay for the product, you're the product. And with Facebook and Google, it's so true that they'll manipulate things in whatever way is most suitable for them. Sometimes you're not sure why it's suitable for them, but they're in charge, and
they can certainly manipulate almost anything. I mean, elections, you name it. But basically, we won't get into that because that takes us down.
There is a principle in there though that says, don't build a business on somebody else's real estate. And I think if you're looking at sort of big LinkedIn accounts that have huge followings, big Facebook accounts that have huge followings, Facebook groups, all of those are subject to just a little tweak from the owner of those big platforms, and you've lost it. You're far better if you've got that sort of community. Make that community work in your own app.
I'm just trying to visualize how this would work, Patrice, with a community-based, construction, whatever. Is it all the sort of chatty things? Or today, here's a picture of my food that I was having on site. I mean, is it that type of banality that people do? I mean, is that?
There's an element of that. Where money tends to be in this kind of community apps is advertising for, say, jobs. So job boards, for example, LinkedIn, very lucrative. Very lucrative. I think community conversation is one aspect that sort of draws people in, but then you need to layer in other things like events, live or digital, jobs, relevant things that people go, oh, okay, there's a reason to come back to it. I also think, and to Kevin's point, you've got a starting point. So if you've got your own Facebook group, there's an opportunity to create your own bespoke tech solution around that. And as I said, the answer is not creating bespoke. Sometimes it can be off the shelf and it can look and feel fantastic. And that's a cheap starting point in the thousands, not anything bigger. But I think after that, it's the opportunity to get to understand your users individually. So this guy sounds a little bit like Facebook or AdWords, but if you can understand them, what they're interested in, you can then provide them with more relevant services and opportunities, because it is your community to then market to, and you're not beholden to the Instagram algorithm changing all of a sudden.
I'm just looking at your website and building on what you kind of just said. You've got something called Debate Mate, and I would imagine, first time I've seen that, and it sounds like you could have a really good debate person in the United States debating a particular subject with somebody in Hampshire. Is that what it's supposed to do? You're matching people for debate.
It's interesting because I think they need to update the name a little bit, because that's what I understand as well. What they do is teach debating skills. So it started as a charity, teach debating skills to children, with the view that what is one of the most powerful skills you can have as an individual? What's your ability to speak and debate a point? I mean, that's huge.
Absolutely.
And they've used as a sort of foundational piece of education, all done remotely, some live events. And then it's grown into courses for individual and kids, but also corporates now sort of going, hang on a sec, that's a really good skill to have. Yeah. My kids done the course. I love it. I quite like to do it. So it's a reasonable sized business who are looking to use technology to enhance things. So a bit different.
It's like the Champions League of debate, isn't it? I mean, you could have people going up the tree, and then it's America versus England, and and we lose terribly because they're always so well prepared.
I like debating this, guys. Yeah, absolutely.
But I think you can see now that with Kevin and this Grow CFO idea, that you very specifically got a bunch of financial managers, and here you've got something that's really aimed at educating children. But there's so many different segments of the market. You'll never stop working, will you?
Hopefully not. It's what I love. There's nothing more than I love than you have an idea, but you don't know how to move it forward. I've done it lots of times. There's a pathway, there's a process. Let's discuss it. Let's kick it around and see where we can get to. As I said, not a salesperson. I just love trying to find solutions through technology.
Yeah. You can, that debate, mate, we could talk about that for the rest of the podcast, but we can't because we've amazingly run out of time. Patrice, you've been an absolutely awesome guest. We're so delighted that you joined us today on the next 100 Days podcast.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Grant.
Graham, that was a fascinating look at the world of apps. And I think the one thing that came over to me that's different about doing business with the affluent is that whole idea of enhancing the experience. And I was thinking around, well, what are your apps generally? There are communities, there are shopping apps, there are information apps, tend to fall in those three buckets. But I'd not thought of it in those terms of really enhancing the experience of the either investor or customer in a high net worth service or product.
I think it's a sparkling idea. I really do. I think one of the things about apps is that they're so there for you. I mean, you're on your phone most of the day, and tick, you're into this app environment that you've made a fairly significant investment, and it's there for you, and there's more information about whether you want to spend more money in that field. You can research the latest documents, you can look at the numbers, etc., and you can talk to others as well, what their experience and what their fears are and what their plans are. There's a sort of a communal opportunity to discuss, but there's also practical hard numbers to review, and then some of the obvious things. I want more of this stuff, press this button and spend more. So effectively it seems to me that there is a case for that type of app, particularly in the investor field, and maybe it's something that's going to crop up again. Well, today, Kevin, it's been a fantastic podcast with Patrice, all the way from Appy Ventures, and Patrice Archer was a grand French chap, but living in Hampshire, and I've got to say he's been thoroughly worth listening to.
Absolutely. Great podcast, Graham.
Well, today I've been Graham Arrowsmith.
I've been Kevin Appleby. Goodbye.
Goodbye.